Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. I am kicking off a live. I did announce it maybe about 45 minutes ago, 50 minutes ago. So I'm going to wait for people to come on. I see some people are coming on. Serpent Belly. Hootie! What's going on? Good to see you. HK Writes. Oh, the SF Astrological Society. What's going on? Hello. All right. I won't be long for this one. Cat Crazy. I like that one. Hi, Cat Crazy. Hey! This Crystal. Crystal is my good friend from Twitter. It's been a while. Smarty Knickers. I want to know who's Smarty Knickers from Albuquerque. What's going on, Albuquerque? All right. Starry-eyed Sage. What's going on? How are you? And there's Ebby. All right. Yep, the Libra gang. Good morning. All right, so I wanted to come on pretty quickly. It has to be under 30 minutes because I have another thing to do. To talk about the video I made yesterday and to also talk about what this new moon coming up reveals and what to relate to. Hey, what's going on, Pandora? Yeah, I guess more Libra gang. And Alicia. Hello, Alicia. So let me go back to the video. And also the video I posted. And when I say the video I posted from the young man, I'm going to call him a young man, I don't know how old he is, who's recounting his experience at the Miami Mall. And I've seen some interesting comments. First, I think some people may have missed or didn't see the essence of my video from yesterday. And in that video, I was trying to drive home more the point that as we're dealing with Mercury-Neptune, and we're still dealing with it, even though it was exact yesterday, the moon is making a conjunct to Mercury today and will square that same point, Neptune, the fog planet, dealing with all the things I talked about with Neptune, intuition, imagination, deception, we could even say some level of reception. All those things become salient. You made me feel like I was at the beginning of Independence Day. Sorry. But I think that's a good point to start. The feelings, the experience of things, regardless of what may have happened, is something really to pay attention to. Do I know with absolute certainty that that guy's not lying? Nope, I don't. He could be looking for clout. Some people have commented like, why does he keep looking over to the right? You know, like what's that? You know, maybe he's making up the story. Could be true. Could also be looking at notes because he's not used to being on camera. I don't know him. I don't know that guy. But I will tell you, he's not the only person who made videos in the last few days about something that happened in Miami. Again, now my good friend, Sparkles of Gold, also known as Nicholas Polomonakos, said like from his research, and I trust him, that it looks like it was just some fireworks that went off and some, people panicked. Again, that could be true. But two things can be true at once, believe it or not. And also, that isn't really the complete point I'm making. When you have an encounter with the paranormal, with something that's beyond your normal waking experience, it becomes important to pay attention, even if you're getting it somewhat secondhand, but it's impacting you. Just like, in terms of what was said about, well, maybe Independence Day, it made me feel like Independence Day. And I think that becomes important to think about. Why? Well, feelings are often shuttled, and impressions and things that we receive, the life of the intuitive, is often scuttled in this world of empiricism and materialism and consumerism and not given its proper due in recognition. Now, at the same time, this is mainly related to European history and culture, and I think it does affect different cultures throughout history. we can get caught up in our superstitions. We can get caught up with too much feeling. I feel like she's a witch. Burn her. All these different things, and it's true that we can think that something is impactful based on a feeling or a thought or an intuition, and think, and get too carried away with it. That is a danger. That may have been a danger in terms of what happened in Miami. Maybe there were just some fireworks and people, in order to justify their fears, or they were in a state of heightened emotion, that they saw something and felt like, well, then it must have been, what I saw. But when you're living the soul's life in the realm of the spiritual, because I think something that happens, especially with people into astrology, is that because astrology is more related to something that we don't normally see, like during the day, we have to be able to reflect on it at night, in the coolness, in the stillness, in the quietness of the night. And so it's more liminal. And that also relates to the word subliminal. And I think we have to get in the practice of making space for things that are not explainable or explicable or understandable in the light of day. And it requires a certain shifting of our mindset. I know this because my natural inclination, those who know me and know me well, especially my students, is skepticism. I don't believe anybody for shit. But what I've learned over the years is like, okay, what else might be happening? Someone could be lying about something, but what is another way in which I can approach this that isn't just about the lie? Now, it depends on the lie. If your husband says, no, I was not with that other woman, and he was, it's going to have different emotional implications for you. And I think it should, and that's fine. But if they lie about something that's more innocuous, whatever that might be, then you might wonder, like, well, what is the nature of this fiction that they've created? And we can talk about the nature of fiction. Like, I think there's even a movie that's out based on a book, American Fiction. I have not seen it. That's dealing with the nuances of this. So again, I don't know what happened in Miami at all. I wasn't there. I'm just looking at videos. I've seen mixed reports. I've seen cloudy, unclear pictures. But when I see an interruption on a collective scale, and it was more than one person talking about this, right? It gets me to think and reflect on, what is Spirit trying to say? And, Spirit is telling me to talk to you guys about more of the spiritual realm. Now, I want to recount quickly a story, why this is so dear to me and why I don't quickly dismiss things like this. If you're someplace in the world where it's a little darker, like it's night, and you're scared of ghosts, then maybe you might turn a light on, because I'm about to tell you a ghost story. And it's from my own personal experience and from my family, okay? And then I'll talk about the new moon that's coming at 20 degrees Capricorn, and then the full moon, and then I will unfortunately have to go. And it's great to see so many people on here, and I will put this up as well. So I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Here's the story. So when I grew up in Buffalo, New York, yeah, Buffalo, I'm not thrilled about the Bills, so I'm not going to say that. But I grew up in Buffalo. My family was the first black family to move in an all-white neighborhood. And the house my father bought was, we could say, in front of railroad tracks. And when I say they're in front, meaning that railroad tracks, from my house's perspective, was directly behind us. And so the trains used to pass by. The tracks and, the trains are no longer there, but that's what would happen. And my brother, my older brother, who's 9 years older, and I shared a room, a back room that faced that track, that those railroad tracks. And, I got used to it. I grew up practically with it as the trains passing by. But the light would come through the window of our bedroom at certain times of the day and certain times of the night, obviously. Well, one day I remember waking up and seeing these tall figures. They weren't 10 feet tall or 9 foot tall like what we see or heard about in Miami, but they were probably about 7 feet, 8 feet. And they were shrouded and they were walking around in our room. I didn't see any faces. All I saw were them milling about because I could make out the shapes because a train had passed. And they were checking on they were more around my brother, but somehow they knew I had awakened. And one came over, still shrouded. I couldn't see the face, and would do like this over my face, wave a hand, and then all I know is I fell back to sleep. I was out. This happened several times over a number of years. But one key time is that I woke up, saw them in the room, milling around, but this time I saw two figures that were in a hallway that was adjacent to our bedroom. And one figure looked like he was wearing a white t-shirt like my father would wear, so I thought it was my father. And then there was another figure who seemed to be dressed like my mother, wearing a head wrap, that's what she wore at night, and it looks like a robe. But as they got closer, because they started going into the room, I couldn't make out the man, and I realized it wasn't my father. And I was kind of scared, and I looked at the woman. The woman had a lighter olive complexion, was dressed like my mother. It was darker olive, right? If you speak Farsi, like my ex-wife, she would say samzi, darker, features. And she came in the room, and I saw that she had like what looked like hazel eyes. But she was dressed like my mom. And she looked at me, saw that I was awake. She kind of smiled. She had little teeth. And she did it like they would do. Bye-bye. Sleep. Went to sleep. Woke up the next day. Told my aunt first, my father's aunt, actually. So it was like my great aunt. And told my mother. And because my great aunt, I guess, was staying with us or visiting us. Told my mother. My mother got really quiet. And she said, when you get older, I'll tell you who that is. I insisted, I think, for a number of days that she tell me now, but she was wise and didn't tell me who that was. Then I, like a normal kid, forgot. Now, you might ask, well, how old were you? About 7 or 8 years old. Cut to about 6 years later. Now, I have family in Philadelphia. Hello, Sylvia. I have family in Philadelphia. We have roots in Philadelphia, so we were visiting family in Philadelphia. Around 14, we had taken a road trip. It was a lot of fun. Got to play my tapes, as my brother was driving down to Philadelphia. And my mom, if you remember, tape recordings. And I was visiting with cousins I did know and had seen before who had come up to Buffalo. They either would come up and stay with us for weeks at a time. But there was one cousin who walked into the room who I didn't know and hadn't seen before. She walks into the room, and she, I look at her, and I gesture to my mom, and I go, Mom, that's her. Suddenly flashed back in my head, like I remembered the woman who had come to visit. And she shook her head, and she said, no, that's not her. That's not her. Then who was it? No, we're not talking about that now, because we're at my cousin's house. I did remember, insisted, she still wouldn't tell me. But I was like, oh. But now it turns out it was my cousin Tina. Tina's still very much alive in Philadelphia, as I heard from my cousin Butch. Because like I said, I saw family in Philadelphia. But she looked like the spitting image of this woman I saw. All right. Cut to 19 years old. Shortly after I had pledged Alpha Phi Alpha, it was October of 1987. So about 6 months after I had pledged. Now, the pledging isn't important. I just remembering the time frame for all this. So October 1987, my grandmother dies, or the woman I had believed or had been told was my grandmother, my mother's mother, for all of my life at that point. That woman, well, let me go back. When I was a kid, around the same age, 8 or 9, I remember going back and forth between my mother, who was about my complexion, and the woman who, was claimed to be her mother, was very light-skinned. They also was color-struck. For those who are black who know, you know what color-struck means. So my grandfather and my grandmother, I'm putting those in quotes, the grandfather after which I was named, they were color-struck. They had their issues. Anyway, I remember looking back and forth and saying to them, to my mother directly, "That's not your mother." And she's like looking appalled and she's like, "Of course it is, blah, blah, blah." And they're going back and forth. And I was like, doesn't make sense. I'm learning things in school and I don't know. And, I think I was a pretty precocious kid and I had learned some things about genetics. And I was like, I don't know how that happens. Now, it can happen. Before you correct me and say like, well, there are light-skinned people in my family and they have had darker-skinned children. I understand that. It's true. But in this particular case, I was just like, I don't know. But they talked me off the ledge. And at that particular point convinced me that that was indeed my grandmother. Cut to again that October 1987. That woman, my grandmother, dies. I guess coming back from visiting their home, meaning my grandmother's home, my mother starts to recount a story. My mother also, just to kind of put it in context, my mother was born in Harlem, New York, but ultimately grew up in Buffalo. She tells me that you were right, Sam, that Anna is her name, is not your grandmother. She is your cousin. What happened is that my mother, she said, died at the hands of a butcher trying to abort twins that she was carrying when she was in Harlem. Hey, Zoe. And hey, Evita's here. Hi, Evita. So the woman who was her mother, right? So she's going on describing about her mom. She didn't really know her mother that long. She was roughly a baby when her mother died, trying to have, at that time, an illegal abortion. So, and that also was very powerful because at the time, some of you who know me, I was an evangelical minister. And true to form and fundamentalism, I was against abortion, all these other things. And I was like, wow, if she had had the right to an abortion, she would have been able to have carried that, to lived and maybe not have faced that. So she goes on as we're driving back home and tells me that Anna raised her after she was sent back to the South when her mother died because she wasn't with her father. And I don't know who my mother's real father is. My mother was sent back to the South in Virginia and was raised with her actual grandmother for a little bit until her mother, and her mother's name, her real mother's name was Virgie. Virgie appeared in a dream to Anna on top of a red schoolhouse and said, "I want you to take care of my daughter." And so Anna sent for my mother, Marion, to Buffalo, and that's when she agreed to take care of her. Now I'm learning all this, and I'm like, wow. So we get home. We get to my house in Buffalo. And my mother goes up and gets back in the day, we used to have, a photo book, an actual book. So she gets this book, and she turns to a page. Now, I've never seen this book, and she had never shown me this book. And she said, well, here's the only picture I have of my mother. And she says, is this the woman you saw when you were a boy? And it was. It was her. And she looks like Tina, my cousin, because her grandfather was her brother. So was Virgie's brother, just to be clear. I know a lot of family connections. So these strong genes have been passed down, which actually was with other cousins as well. So what does this all mean? But here's the thing to know in terms of what it means. Well, I sense something, right? But I had never known that there would be anyone else other than, Anna, other than suspecting that it wasn't exactly her mother, but I didn't know who that woman was who came to visit me. Virgie. I had no reason to know who she was. I had looked through my mom's albums before, but never seen that particular album with that particular picture. So when I tell you that sometimes we get into this realm of the liminal and the spiritual, I've seen it with my own eyes. Now, I still don't know who those beings were that had come with my mother, my grandmother, I should say, my actual grandmother. I don't know who they are. They could be ancestors. And this is why I'm saying you have to leave space for what that might be. Nephilim, whatever kind of being you want to imagine. Aliens. I used to joke when I was a kid that I was from outer space. Maybe it was that. But it's not literally that. So when you encounter the demonic realm, as I explained in that video, it is encountering a realm that is beyond your normal comprehension. And so you must, by virtue of that, make allowance for what might be happening, and not just through the prism of how you think it should be happening, like it's aliens, or it's gods, or it's Jesus, or whatever. There's any number of ways in which you can approach it. Soften your view. So I just wanted to recount that story. I still make a lot of space for Virgie, and I feel more of her presence in my life. And I probably have learned through spiritual means more about her life than I think even my mother knew. And I have also done ancestral research on her and her sister. And her sister I grew up calling her Granny because I believe that was Anna's mother. So when I say cousin, Anna was actually my second cousin. It was my mother's first cousin. So for those of you who are just joining, I think you're going to hear an interesting tale that I'll put up a little later. And I think it's a good thing to kind of share as we are approaching a new moon. And this new moon in Capricorn is at 20 degrees Capricorn. And that's pretty close to planets or points like ascendant, midheaven, icy, or descendant that you may have between, let's say, I go as low as 12 degrees Capricorn or as high as 28 degrees Capricorn, roughly. Those are my orbs. You don't have to use those orbs if you don't want to, but roughly if you're looking at planets along that axis. I say Capricorn and Cancer. So if you have something at 12 Cancer, then this new moon is opposing it. What I want to bring to your attention is that this new moon is reflective of a lunar eclipse that happened January 10th, 2020. As I've mentioned before, there's a parallel between new moons and full moons that alternate every 4 years. So any new moon that's kind of cropping up has a parallel in degree, not necessarily by sign, but degree, with something preceding it 4 years before. So that was actually a lunar eclipse in 2020. You're like, okay, so what? Well, particular themes are going to get struck that you may, if you can reflect on that particular time, particular things related to your chart may be happening. So for instance, like this is going to be close to my Mars. This is when I start to make Martian moves, which I'm going to explain in a minute. So this is going to be reflective of that. What else might I say? It's actually, as I understand it, if I'm remembering correctly, this is in the terms, I think, of Venus. I probably have to get up and get that. But it is highlighting more so how we're dealing with our desires, more so in terms of what we're seeking to manifest. And it can be, by virtue of being a new moon, the seeding, the implantation of something that we want to develop and build. Because Capricorn is a sign of Saturn. It's an earth sign. And contrary to what many say, Capricorn isn't just a goat, it's a sea goat. So it has mythical, magical, and even material aspects of its manifestation. It's when we're seeking to manifest things. I just want to go back now because I'm going toward my time. I want to go back and talk to you briefly, or say, you guys might remember last month I talked about the new moon in Sagittarius. And what I said about it, Alexa always thinks I'm talking to her. What I said about the new moon in Sagittarius at the time, last month, was that it was roughly at 22 degrees of Sagittarius, or 20 degrees of Sagittarius. And it related to something that was 4 years before, in terms of its cycle. And that it also related to the Mercury retrograde, or particularly when Mercury goes direct, as he did on January 1st. You might remember I said, well, this is around the time that I was talking about, making my mind up and having some resolve, because that activates my MC-IC axis, meaning way in which I experience grounding and materializing things in the world. So I knew that this was going to be a big, moment for me. And when I say a big moment, especially related to some aspect of either career or things related to the home. And then, those who follow me on Twitter know that, during that time frame, I got in a big hullabaloo with the Leo King, him calling me out and essentially trying to make me out to sound like I belong to the clan. I'm not kidding. You can go to Twitter, and if you're following on Twitter, see that. That was more the career, but I was talking about looking for a home. Well, what I can tell you, because I practice most of what, if not all of what I preach, I'm in contract for buying a condo, and I'm moving at the end of the month. So when I tell you, you can start thinking about the specific degrees, not just the signs, like it's new moon in Capricorn. Start thinking specifically. Whether you teach yourself that or work with an astrologer, you can make that work if you're paying attention to the specificity of astrology. This is what I drill back and drill, more to my students and clients. It's really more about that. So yes, I am buying a condo. It is in Santa Fe. I am not leaving Santa Fe. It is really only 12 minutes from this current location. Bit smaller, but lots of amenities. And here's the thing, it's mine. Plantain and Puff Puff, I would say 29th degree still can count as an activation related to this new moon. So pay attention to that. And I'm in what we call a Mars perfection year. So this new moon is on my Mars or close to it. So this is going to be, like I knew, some measure of activation related to making this journey. Thank you. Namaste. See, who is that? I can't make it out. I can't see it. Gigamesh, but thank you. Thank you for the congratulations. I think I know what it is. I think it's Stacy. I'm not sure. Oh, I miss you guys too. Serpent Belly Woman is asking, how do you track moon perfection? It is Stacy. Stacy and Aaron, my frat brother. What's going on? Thank you, Stacy. How do you track moon perfection years? Well, you can perfect from the moon. That's longer than I have time to teach or share. Sorry, I can't do it like I won't be able to do it in the amount of time I have right now. But I perfect from the ascendant, which doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. So I'm 56. So if we start from my first house being 48, second house is then going to be, okay, first house 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, fifth house, 53, 54, 55, 56, ninth house. Ninth house perfection year. So I'm in a ninth house perfection year ruled by Mars. So I knew some things could jump off. So when I saw this particular apartment, I said to myself, this is a perfect time. So most of astrology is knowing what time it is. All right, thank you everyone who joined me live. I will put this video up as I get a chance. And enjoy the coming new moon. And be easy on yourself and others, especially with this moon, Mercury, Neptune square. All right. Peace.